What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Paranormies Present, the Ahnenerbe Hour. I am Johnny Monoxide, and tonight I am joined by Mr. Adam Haidt, Mr. Scott Taylor, and the one and only, joining us for the first time, the one and only, Mr. Jim Fetzer. How's it going, guys?
Hey, real excited to be here tonight.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one.
And I'm simply delighted to be here joining you guys tonight, so it's terrific.
Awesome. It's great to have you on, Jim. We're big fans. I've been following your work for a while. I heard you on Red Ice quite a while ago. And I've read a couple of your books, read a lot of your blog posts, listened to a lot of your podcasts, seen your videos. So yeah, big fan, real big fan. So yeah,
excellent. That's all terrific.
Oh yeah. So let's jump right into it. Since you are one of the premier experts on the Sandy Hook, or as we like to call it, the Sandy Hoax incident from Newtown, Connecticut. There's a bunch of new things. Was it 1,500 pages or something like that was released recently?
Yeah, but it was all complete nonsense. It was about Adam Lanza, who was a fictional character, so they could make up anything they wanted. I mean, it really, this is beyond belief. When the book Nobody Died at Sandy Hook was published in 2015 with 13 contributors, including 6 current or retired college professors, some of whom had published as many as 80 articles on Sandy Hook. Before I edited the book, I myself 30, so we'd already done our homework. The book was up, went on sale on the 22nd of October. It sold nearly 500 copies when it was pulled on the 19th of November because it was just too hot. It blows the case apart. It shows the school had been closed by 2008. It was loaded with asbestos and other biohazards damaged by hurricane. There was a big flood in the area in 2007, which I think was the last straw. And they abandoned the school. We have in the book, which I released for free as a PDF, so anyone listening can download it for themselves and have the book on their own desktop by just entering the title, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook. We have in Chapter 7 50 photographs of them furnishing an empty house to be the Adam Lanza home. And you can tell it's fraudulent for multiple indications. One, for example, the Adam Lanza bedroom is made up 2 different ways. It's made up neat, it's made up messy. I think they were trying to decide how they were going to present it to the public, but obviously from a forensic point of view, it was either neat or it was messy at the time that they entered the home, and you wouldn't change it, make it up different than it was for the purpose of keeping a set of forensic photographs. In addition, if you go to the Nancy Lanza bedroom, where Adam is alleged to have shot his mother with a .22 caliber rifle, there's some red stuff on the bed, but it doesn't appear to be blood. It looks to me like it might be raspberry jam.
Yeah, it does look like it doesn't look at all like coagulated blood whatsoever.
Right, exactly. And on the wooden chest at the foot of the bed, there's forms on the chest, which we find in other photographs. I believe they were keeping records of how they were arranging the home. Kelly Watt, who has her own commercial and home cleaning service, who has proven to be a very astute student of Sandy Hook, spied a blue moving pad beneath the leg of the bed that in their haste they forgot to remove. But the real tell is you look at the walls are all blank. There are no paintings, no photographs, no decorations, and there are also no personal effects. You know, each of us can walk through our house and look here and there, and you're going to find personal effects almost every corner, on every surface, every desk or bureau. There are none there, which of course is all indicative that no one actually had lived there. It was just an empty house they furnished. We have even more from in the following chapter, 50 photographs of the refurbishing of the school to serve as a stage, including even the moving vans. We have the nameplate on the classroom, still has a moving tag on it. The piece de resistance is a photograph of the SWAT team already there, just above the SWAT vehicle at the top left corner. You can see a string of windows in classroom 10, that after the event would be shot out, but here they're perfectly normal and undamaged. If you come down the flagpole, which is at full mast, and move slightly to the right, you see a familiar figure reclining against the wall with his arms folded, awaiting the arrival of his portable mortuary tent. Wayne Carver, MD, would play such a crucial role, in being the representative of the state and medicine about the case, where he makes fantastic claims about having performed a phenomenal number of autopsies in a brief period of time, can't even remember how many boys, how many were girls, claims they were shot 3 to 11 times, which all by itself is ridiculous. But we also, and there's crime scene tape up for a crime that is yet to be committed. When we published the first edition of the book, we thought this photograph had been taken the morning of the 14th of December 2012, but it was actually taken the evening of the 13th, the night before. We even have the FEMA manual for the 2-day drill at Sandy Hook with a rehearsal on the 13th, going live on the 14th. And once you realize it was a 2-day event, you start to sort out the varied photographic evidence and images we have, including a sign, a neon sign that says everyone must check in. Well, right in the manual, it says everyone must check in. There were boxes of pizza and bottled water at the firehouse. It's standard part of FEMA exercises. They provide refreshments. There were porta potties already in place and restrooms. Many had name tags on lanyards. That's how FEMA identifies their participants. We had parents bringing children to the scene. Now, no parent would bring a child to the scene of a child shooting massacre. But this was the rehearsal. This was treated as a festive event. Moreover, some of the participants became confused. They put up donation websites the day before the event, and even Adam Lanza's death was recorded in the Social Security Death Index as having occurred on the 13th, making his feat in shooting 20 children and 6 adults the following day all the more remarkable.
Yeah, there's so many things that were wrong with that story from even the I have one question. How do you explain the actors? Like, how do you explain that these people would do that? I mean, are they just that sinister and devious that they would actually perform these blatant lies to the public? I mean, or do you think that they just don't know? Or what do you think is going on? No. They were all knowing and willing participants. I think they were gun control enthusiasts who wanted to exemplify what could happen if we didn't impose more stringent gun controls. Plus, they made out like bandits. The families were brought in. It was a synthetic creation. Many of them were given homes for free on Christmas Eve. I mean, transactions that wouldn't take place in the real world because there are no real estate transactions on New Year's Eve. Right. And they made out handsomely because they divided between 27 and 130 million bucks between 26 families. That's over $1 million bucks apiece. In fact, I'm convinced the reason that the man who claims to be the father of Noah Posner, Lenny Posner, whose real name appears to be Leonard P. Osner, so he blended his middle initial with his last name, who refuses to allow his image to appear on television so that when Darknet, a show on Showtime, came here to interview me, they spent quite a few hours interviewing me to juxtapose with Lenny Posner, but he wouldn't allow his face to be shown on television. Now, I mean, I could give you a lot of explanations for that, but none of them are flattering to Lenny Posner, who claims to have lost a son, Noah. We also know of Noah. He's the most unusual little boy because he not only died at Sandy Hook on the 14th of December 2012, but again in Pakistan on the 16th of December 2014, where his photograph appears again. Oh, that's right. He's the kid he's the kid that was in Pakistan as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. In the meanwhile, Kelly Watt had over 100 hours of conversation with Lenny Posner, and she told him she didn't believe a word he said. She didn't believe he had a son. She didn't believe he died. And Lenny, I think, inadvisedly sent her a copy of a death certificate that turned out to be a fabrication, the bottom half of a real death certificate, the top half of a fake.
Oh, wow.
And needless to say, if he actually had a son who had died, there would have been no need to fake it. He would have had a real death certificate. So this is all very, very telling. You can find the fabricated death certificate in the book. The top part doesn't have a file number, has the wrong estimated time of death at 11 a.m. when the shooting took place between 9:30 and 9:35. But we've also, in the meanwhile, been able to determine how they fabricated the kids. Kelly, again, making another path-breaking contribution, discerned a certain similarity between the photographs of Noah, the six-year-old who's supposed to have died as a first grader, and a fellow by the name of Michael Vabner, who's supposed to be his older stepbrother. And she showed photographs to friends of hers, and she asked, "Do you see any resemblance?" They said, oh yeah, that's this guy when he was a little kid, or that's him all grown up. So we pursued Kelly's conjecture. 6 of us collaborated. You can find it on Sandy Hook Charade. Noah Posner was Michael Vabner as a child. We were able to prove they had the same eyes, the same ears, the same general shape of the skull, same mouth, and so forth. And we even created a GIF where you can see Noah Posner turn into Michael Vabner. I mean, this is how they did it. And now there's a more recent article because the discovery was made that the average age of the Sandy Hook mothers was 10 years older than it ought to have been. That the average in the United States for first giving birth is 26, but these mothers averaged 36. By one calculation, that was so improbable as to be on the order of 109.4 quadrillion to 1.
I remember that figure.
Goodness.
Yeah, that's basically a statistical impossibility, right?
It is. Well,
so, it explains what they did by going back 10 years in time, to fake the kids. I mean, they actually gave birth to the child, like Michael Vabner, but now they used photographs of him that were 10 years out of date to present as though this were a child who had died in 2012, when the photographs were actually taken about 2002.
Right.
So, in fact, this is how they did it. It's really stunning when you put all the pieces together, the elaborate fakery that was involved here. Then, of course, on the 14th, you see none of the standard procedures were followed. There was no surge of EMTs into the building. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have even allowed the parents to enter the building. They identified them based on photographs, and now you know the reason why.
Right.
There were no children in the building. I mean, they were only existed in the form of photographs. The Newtown clerk had entered into secret negotiations with the state legislature so she would not have to release death certificates on children, so she'd have a cover story for why she wasn't releasing death certificates for the Sandy Hook kids. Mm-hmm. And when they destroyed the building, all those involved in the demolition were required to take not 6-month, not 10-year, but lifetime gag orders, so they couldn't talk about what they saw or did not see. And let me just add, in relation to, I mentioned that photograph of the SWAT team vehicle already being there. We also have photographs of the windows of Classroom 10 before and after they were shot out. We have another photograph of the perps actually drilling holes in the aluminum window frame to simulate bullet holes, and another where they've inserted pink rods to illustrate the trajectories, all of which are exactly perpendicular, 90 degrees to the window frame, and all parallel to one another, which is all a fantasy. I was a Marine Corps officer at the recruit depot in San Diego, and I had 15 DIs and 300 recruits under my command, including marksmanship training at Edson Range Camp Pendleton. No one familiar with firearms would find this remotely credible. It's totally made up. And in fact, for example, when Sophia Smallstorm produced her Sandy Hook in 3, 4, 5, and 6 dimension, or 2, 3, 4, and 5 dimensions, she had to open it with a bus ride to Sandy Hook with a marksman, an expert shot commenting, talking about the preposterous shooting attributed to Adam Lanza. This guy was a string bean, by the way. He was supposed to be 6 feet tall, but only weighed about 112 pounds. I don't think he could have even lugged 30 pounds of gear that he's supposed to have brought with him, including a bulletproof vest. The whole thing is ridiculous. He's supposed to have shot out the front window But in fact, he only had these automatic weapons and a couple of handguns, but it was a big slug that was used to shoot out the window. It's even embedded in the of a small bookcase there. When you look at, there were a dozen or 16 state troopers from Connecticut who claimed they entered the school building that way. But, the Stooges would have done better. Curly would have gone in to open the door for Mo and Larry. I mean, it's just ridiculous to think, because going through there with the sharp edges, they could tear their uniforms. I mean, I'll tell you,
they could cut themselves. That was complete. Yeah. That was complete crap. No, I remember we covered a whole lot. We covered a whole lot of this on our Sandy Hook episode. There's no way that any of that happened. Actually, now I have a friend. Now, everybody who knows anybody who talks about Sandy Hook always gets this, the one friend or the one friend of the friend who, I know somebody who died there, or my friend's daughter, or something. There's that one person. So I had this friend, one of my best friends from high school. I went to high school in Connecticut, and his little sister is married to a Connecticut state trooper. And when I first started
to a Connecticut state trooper, go ahead.
So when I first started posting about Sandy Hook on my Facebook a while ago, when it first happened, she was one of those that was like, I can't believe you would think that this is fake. My husband was there, and I was like, oh my God, really? He was there? Can I please talk to him? Like, I want to talk to this guy. And she unfriended me, blocked me, and my buddy Kelly was like, dude, what did you say to Holly? I was like, why? He's like, well, Holly just called me and told me that you're an asshole and she never wants to speak to you ever again. Because I called out her husband, basically.
That all you were doing. Well, I'll tell you, you see, it was the state police who ran the whole op. It was the state police who took those photographs that we have in the book. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They were complicit. They were the key in implementing it. I mean, this is embarrassing.
It really is.
You basically called her bluff.
Oh yeah. And I have another friend from Connecticut who she's like, I have a friend who went to the funerals and whatever. And again, I was like, put your friend, give her my email address. I want to talk to her. And of course, I never got anything back from her either. Now, speaking of getting shut down, your book on Sandy Hook got shut down. As did our episode. Exactly. As did our episode. Now, this is we've encountered what everybody's heard of, the JIDF, like the Jewish Internet Defense Force and whatever, that always gets on and defends Israel and whatnot, no matter what. But we've discovered a group of people that we call the SHIDF, the Sandy Hook Internet Defense Force. And anytime you mention Sandy Hook on the internet, these people get into the comments section and they call you names, and they do the whole I knew people there, and then they laugh at you. And Adam, what else? What was the other stuff that goes on, Adam?
Yeah, it's really it's ludicrous, because it happens anywhere, and it all follows a very same basic pattern. And even some of the sentence structure, because I was reading a lot of different blogs for Sandy Hook research and looking at different YouTube videos and stuff, and they all say the same sort of things with the same sort of structure, saying like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're a horrible person for questioning this. You're an idiot. Just like, it's always the same thing. And what's remarkable to me is how fast they will act. It's almost as if they have, I don't know, like a Google feed or something, that just anytime there's a new web page or someone says Sandy Hook anywhere on the internet, it alerts them, and they can go there and make an account or do whatever they got to do start running defense.
They're going to have an algorithm, a macro, some little routine that'll pick it up.
One of the most remarkable ones to me that we've encountered wasn't necessarily our Sandy Hook episode, but there was another episode we did recently. I can't remember which one it was. And I think it was you, John. You mentioned Sandy Hook for all of 30 seconds. It was nothing.
Yes. No, we talked about what we talked about was how our Sandy Hook episode got taken down. That's all we said.
Yeah. And you must have triggered the algorithm or whatever, because there was someone in the comments talking about Sandy Hook, and again doing the same thing of, I know people that died there. How dare you? Blah blah blah. I mean, every time you mention it, you get these people showing up.
Well, it's pretty ridiculous, of course. I mean, the school was closed. There weren't any children there. Local residents were speaking out initially before Lieutenant Paul Vance, who was running the op, threatened to prosecute anyone who offered a view at variance with the police narrative. But before that, we had neighbors saying, gee, they thought it was odd any kids were there because the school had been abandoned a long time ago. I mean, they were saying that. And then they're threatened with prosecution. They might even have been sent these national defense letters you're not even allowed to acknowledge you've received that, threaten you with some kind of criminal prosecution if you talk about something and you're not allowed to acknowledge the letter. I mean, the FBI can do this kind of dirty stuff. In fact, the FBI spends more time faking stuff. It's this. What's going on in New York now, this latest truck crash looks to me to be staged. We had an earlier one this year in Times Square even that was completely fake. The car was there actually the night before under a tarp.
Hey, before we jump into that, Jim.
They had stuntmen. Yeah, we'll go anywhere you want.
Before we jump into that, why don't you tell us how your book got shut down, and then we'll move on from there. How about that?
Well, they just banned it. I mean, they just sent me a note that it doesn't satisfy their guidelines. But of course, that book had been produced by Create Space, which is a subsidiary of Amazon.com, and it had satisfied all their guidelines. Had been up there for nearly a month. The way it was, what happened was, a couple days in advance, I was contacted by a woman who claimed to be representing Inside Edition, and that they wanted to do, a program, a TV show about our findings, but they needed to conduct a pre-interview. So I was switched into what I'm now convinced with a basement at Langley, and I was subjected to a professional interrogation by a guy who kept saying to me, he began by saying, what do you got? When I started laying out the evidence, the school had been closed. He says, is that the best you got? And I started laying out the evidence of 50 photographs about the house. Is that the best you got? I started laying out the evidence about the photographs from the school and about the SWAT team vehicle there and so on and so on. And he ran me through this routine, with about 6 or 7 iterations before, he was never polite. He never introduced himself. I mean, it was obvious this was an interrogation. It wasn't an interview. And he obviously concluded I had too much, and that's when they made the decision to shut it down. Now, Jay Garvey, who had been a White House spokesman, had come to Amazon as senior vice president. But I'm sure that Jeff Bezos and Garvey were involved in the decision to ban the book. I mean, it was just too hot. They had 20 books, by the way. They had 20 books on Sandy Hook available at the time, some of which were completely crackpot. One was by a teacher who claimed to have crammed 15 first graders into a 3x4 bathroom.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. That's ridiculous.
The door to the bathroom swung inward. So she claimed to have had 15 first graders and herself. Now, if you figure the average weight of a first grader is 50 pounds, and that's probably low, then 15 would be 750 pounds. You got herself another 100 plus pounds, 850 pounds. I tell you, a single NFL guard or tackle weighing a 350 would have filled up that bathroom. There wouldn't have been room for anyone else. I mean, it's a preposterous story. They're willing to sell preposterous stories as long as they agree with the official account. But the one book they had out of 20 that offered a divergent view, no, that was too hot to handle, so they banned it.
Right. No, that's what they do. They shut it down.
You mentioned.
Go ahead, Adam.
You've been shut down in other ways too. Earlier, before we started the show. Do you mind going over that?
Well, I'm not clear what you mean. I mean,
about the Real Deal?
Well, well, that's true too. The Real Deal was a video show where I produced, my goodness, how many Real Deals do we have? 250? I mean, these were really excellent shows. I'm trying to recall if they were all 2 hours. You can find many of them still online, but my producer, and this happened a couple of years ago, wound up having his internet cable physically cut 3 different times. I mean, they were getting the word across that this cannot continue. And it was at that point that I began doing real, I didn't want to put him and his family in jeopardy. I began doing intermittent Real Deals. I acquired the capacity to record for myself. And of course, I'd also been on Veterans Today from 2011 when I was invited by Gordon Duff to join up, and had published 150 columns when in 2015 with a Jade Helm. I think it may have been April. He was berating another former Marine by the name of Robert O'Dowd for an article about Jade Helm 15, which was really obviously not a training op. And he had added an editor's note condemning this. And I thought that was completely outrageous. So the O'Dowd's had appeared Monday. Wednesday, I published a piece of my own in which I criticized Duff for having censored, and went on and explained why Jade Helm was obviously not an ordinary training op, which he had been insisting. That night, I went on with Stu Webb on his radio broadcast, and we discussed it all. And the next morning, I came back to find I'd been given the boot from Veterans Today. He still had my name on the masthead 3 or 4 weeks later, and I said, Gordon, I'm gone now. Don't you think it's time to take my name off the masthead? He not only did that, but he deleted all 150 of my articles. Now, it had such an impact on their viewership that the editorial board joined together to have him restore them. I don't know if they lost half their viewers, but it was completely outrageous. And, so I restored them because I'd been planning to use these articles in books. I mean, I had a whole lot on JFK, a whole lot on 9/11. I mean, I bring together the best experts I can find and publish their work or collaborate with them. And when he restored them, then I rapidly transferred as many as I could because I figured this is not going to last. And indeed, I don't remember what subsequently occurred that pissed him off, but he went back and deleted them again. And of course, they're no longer available there, but most of them are on my blog at jamesfetzer.blogspot.com. And I've used lots of them in the various books I published, which include on Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, Orlando to Dallas and beyond. I have a new book on Charlottesville that'll be out within the next 10 days. Of course, I hadn't written on Charlottesville when I was still with Veterans Today. I've got a book on 9/11 that used a good number of those essays, a book on JFK, which is actually my fourth. I published 3 books when I was still a university professor. Assassination Science in 1998, Murder in Dealey Plaza 2000, and The Great Zapruder Film Hoax in 2003, with Open Court, which is a well-known press for philosophers because it publishes the Library of Living Philosophers, and under an imprint of Open Court called Cat Feet Press. The editor, who I think is a super guy, named David Ramsey Steele, and I, who got along famously, we actually met and began having a conversation about JFK at an American Philosophical Association a meeting where there are 3 divisions, the Eastern, the Central, and the Western. And I think it was a meeting of the Central, which was probably in Chicago, where the offices for Open Court are located, that we fell into a conversation about JFK. And he was taking the stance that the Warren Commission had it right, and I was explaining to him why that was indefensible. But we got along really well. So in spite of the fact that he professes he believes the Warren Commission report, he published 3 books, which Vincent Bugliosi, the celebrated prosecutor of Charles Manson, author of the book Helter Skelter, who's an avid, adamant, and committed defender of the Warren report, in his monstrous 1,500-page attempt to revive the defunct, described mine as the only exclusively scientific books ever published on the assassination. Now, notwithstanding that endorsement, he didn't follow up because we had proven in the first that the autopsy x-rays had been altered to conceal a fist-sized blowout at the back of the head, that the x-rays showed evidence of a second shot to the head, that the brain shown in diagrams and photographs in the National Archives could not possibly be the brain of JFK. By the time we got to the 3, I had a national conference sponsored by the university in 1999 in Minneapolis on the death of JFK. And I would chair or co-chair 2 Dallas conferences in 2000, 2001. Then I organized my own conference in 2003 on the Duluth campus to bringing in the 6 best experts on the Zapruder film, which yielded the book and the Great Zapruder Film Hoax. Or in the meanwhile, I discovered that while they blacked out that blowout to the back of the head that they patched in the X-ray, in the early frames from 313 forward, where the hit seems to take place, but 313 is actually a merge of two different shots, one from behind and Jack slumped forward, then Jack eased him back up and was looking him right in the face when he was hitting the right temple by a frangible or exploding bullet that set up shockwaves that blew his brains out the rear with such force that when they hit Officer Bobby Hargis right into the left rear, he initially thought he himself had been shot. They merged those two. Jack actually then slumps to the left. But when they revived the film, they did massive editing and revision at Hawkeye Works, which is a secret CI photo lab adjacent to Kodak headquarters in Rochester, New York. They took out too many frames, so you get this violent back to the left, which no one in Dealey Plaza observed at the time, and that's because it was an artifact of the way they edited the film. But when you put all that, together, you got massive disproof that this was done by any of the usual suspects. The KGB, for example, no doubt had the ability to edit a film, but they could not have obtained a copy of the Zapruder that is subjected to editing. The Mafia, for example, could not have extended its reach into Bethesda Naval Hospital to alter X-rays under control of medical officers of the U.S. Navy or agents of the Secret Service. Or pro-Castro Cubans couldn't have substituted another brain for the brain of JFK. I mean, you're getting down to a very narrow set involving the Secret Service and the U.S. military, Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover. The Mafia was supportive of it, but didn't. I'll have to call them back. Hang on a second. I'll call you right back. I'm on the air. It has the effect, you see, of refuting, providing evidence. It's overwhelming that those entities cannot have done it. The best book, actually, to focus on the perfect conspiracy was by Noel Twyman, published in 1997, entitled Bloody Treason, where he described the most perfect conspiracy as involving the CIA and the Mafia and the Secret Service and the Joint Chiefs and Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar, because... See, Lyndon arranged it. He forced himself on the ticket in 1960. He wasn't on Bobby or Jack's long list, much less her short. Jack had already invited Stuart Symington of Missouri to be his running mate, but gave him overnight to think about it. Bobby went by the Johnson suite to extend a pro forma offer, never imagining Linda would express the least interest. But instead, he leaped on it. He threatened to expose that JFK had Addison's disease and wasn't expected to live a long, healthy life, that he had had dalliances, including with beautiful women who were spies for East Germany. Moreover, he added, if he weren't on the ticket, then any legislative proposal sent down by the White House would be dead on arrival because he'd block them in his position as the powerful majority leader. Bobby and Jack couldn't figure a way around it and had to accede to Lyndon's demand. When one of his wealthy backers heard of it, he was outraged because now LBJ was going to help JFK become elected. He burst into the Johnson suite cursing and swearing. Bobby Baker took him into a bedroom and explained what they had in mind. He came out all smiles and said he thought that was an excellent plan. Bobby would subsequently state that JFK would not live out his first term and that he would die a violent death. And in fact, Lyndon Johnson sent his chief administrative aide, Cliff Carter, down to Dallas to make sure all the arrangements were in place for the assassination.
Well, didn't LBJ say to his mistress something about those sons of bitches won't ever make fun, won't ever laugh at me again. That's not a threat. That's a promise.
Yeah, they won't ever humiliate
before.
Me again.
Yeah, that's the one. Humiliate me.
Well,
again,
this is Madeline Duncan Brown, with whom I had over 100 conversations. Madeline began an affair with Lyndon in 1948. She bore him a son, Stephen. This was not his only child out of wedlock. She was therefore invited to many social events. And the night before the assassination, she was invited to the home of Clint Murchison, one of the great oil barons. There were only about 36 people there, but some of them were heavy hitters. She remembered, for example, J. Edgar Hoover was there. He frequently would stop in Dallas with his close personal friend Clyde Tolson on the way to the Del Mar racetrack in California. where when Hoover laid down a bet, his horse invariably won. And the Del Mar track was owned by Clint Murchison. Madeline thought maybe it was in his honor. H.L. Hunt, who was nominally a competitor in the oil business with Murchison, was there. George Brown of Brown and Root Heavy Construction was there. When the Vietnam War went down, Brown and Root got the contract, no bid, to dredge a new port at Cam Ranh Bay, which has, when Vietnam has many magnificent natural ports, I'm sure they didn't need one more, but he got $1 billion for that. Richard Nixon was there. Madeline remembered he was driven out by a local Republican leader, worked in the same bank building where she was a young advertising executive. John J. McCloy, our former high commissioner to Germany, who'd been the chief executive officer of Chase Manhattan Bank, was there. And when Lyndon showed up unexpectedly, these heavy hitters disappeared into a boardroom for 15 or 20 minutes. And when it broke up, Lyndon strode over toward Madeline, and she told me she expected he was going to whisper sweet nothings in her ear. Instead, he told her in a hateful tone of voice that after tomorrow, he wasn't going to have to put up with embarrassment for those Kennedy boys any longer. That's not a threat. That's a promise. He actually called her and told her the same thing the following day. But more interesting than that is 6 weeks later, they had a rendezvous at the Driscoll Hotel on New Year's Eve, where Madeline confronted him with rumors rampant in Dallas at the time that he'd been involved since no one stood to gain more personally. Lyndon blew up at her and told her the CIA and the oil boys had decided that Jack had to be taken out, which is as close to a confession as you'll ever get. But there's a huge amount of corroborating evidence. Madeline's got a book. Billy Saul Estes has a book. Bar McClellan has a book. E. Howard Hunt gave his what he thought would be his deathbed confession, though he actually survived, to his son, St. John, who I've met on 2 occasions. He gave the chain of command to St. John as going from Lyndon Johnson to Cord Meyer to David Atlee Phillips to William Harvey to David Sanchez Morales, and then to the shooters and their coordinators. And I've identified 6 of the shooters.
And six of the shooters?
Yeah, I think there were at least 7. I've read a recent study proposing there was an 8th, but I can guarantee 6 and a probable 7th.
Where can I find that? Where can I find the information on the 6 shooters? I've never heard that.
It's right online. It's right online and in my book. You can I'll tell you. Just do a search. 6 JFK shooters ID'd, 3 tied to CIA, Oswald not among them, and you'll find that at jamesfetzer.blogspot.com.
Okay, that's because honestly, this is the first I've ever heard of more than 2 or 3. Like I didn't. That's really.
No. There were 8, 9, or 10 shots fired, and they were all.
Hey, so what do you make of all this new stuff that Trump released?
I'm sorry.
What do you make of the Trump JFK release? Well,
we have some interesting stuff there. Let me pull up, and I'll give you a sampler because it's all very consistent with what I've been explaining to you here.
Yeah, we went over it. We went over this a little bit last week. We basically came to the conclusion that Johnson was the linchpin of the whole operation, and that
sure. I mean, he was the guy who would become president, and in that capacity, he could guarantee that no one would ever be punished for their involvement. Here's one. Here's a document. It shows that Earl Cabell, who was the mayor of Dallas at the time, and the brother of Charles Cabell, whom JFK dismissed as a deputy director of the CIA in the wake of the investigation of what happened at the Bay of Pigs conducted by Bobby Kennedy and Maxwell Taylor. He was a 3-star Air Force general. Was the brother of the mayor, Earl Cabell, and now it turns out we have a document that Earl Cabell joined the CIA in 1956. So this is the brothers who were the axis between the CIA and Dallas. I mean, this was their backyard. Charles was born in Dallas in 1903. His brother Earl was born near Dallas in 1906. In his capacity as mayor, he supervised the police department and ceremonial activities, including motorcades. That's one of the good ones. There's a speech by a guy named Orrin Fenton Potito of St. Petersburg, Florida, talking about the assassination. And Potito says in his speech that the Surgeon General's report on the assassination stated the first bullet entered the president's throat below the Adam's apple, clearly showing that two persons were involved, with the first shot being fired from the bridge across the parkway in front of the car. To further substantiate this, Potito said there was a bullet hole in the windshield of the president's car. Well, that's close, but not right. Actually, Jack had already been hit in the back, 5.5 inches below the collar, just to the right of the spinal column, by a shot that was fired from the top of the county records building by my account, Deputy Sheriff Harry Weatherford, who had obtained a professional quality silencer just 2 weeks before. He was using a 30-06 to impress a Mannlicher Carcano bullet in the president's back using a plastic collar known as a sabot. This was actually the second hit on JFK. It was fired from inside the triple underpass by an Air Force expert by the name of Jack Lawrence, who went to work for the automobile dealership that provided the vehicles for the motorcade, which oddly enough were all different makes and models and colors. So that the perps could know exactly who was where, they removed the president's military aide from the front seat of the presidential limousine, which ought properly to have been in the middle of the motorcade, preceded by a flatbed truck with cameramen, because this was a big political event. But they canceled the flatbed truck. They put the president's limo out front so there'd be no confusion on the part of the shooters, which, of course, was totally improper.
Right.
And by moving his military aide, who normally would have sat in between William Greer, the driver, and Roy Killerman, the agent in charge, in the passenger seat, to the last vehicle, along with the president's personal physician, Admiral George Berkeley, they ensured a transit of the bullet through the windshield to Jack, because otherwise it would have hit his military aide. That was the second of the hits. After, the driver, William Greer, after those bullets had been fired, received what appears to have been a signal from a guy called the Cuban, who reaches out and extends his fist, and he pulls the limo to the left into a halt, and it's a very rough stop. I mean, it jostles everyone forward. Mm-hmm. And then while they're stopped, Jack's hit twice in the head. He's hit in the back of the head by a shot fired from the Dow Tex by an anti-Castro Cuban by the name of Nestor Tony Escadro using a Mannlicher Carcano, which was the only unsilenced weapon being used in Dealey Plaza, so that would set up an acoustical impression of 3 shots being fired, because he fired 3 shots, but the weapon's so unreliable, known as the humanitarian rifle in World War II, for never actually harming anyone on purpose. He had a miss that hit a distant curbing and injured a bystander by the name of James Tague, but also a second miss that hit the chrome strip above the windshield. But after the limo was brought to a halt, he hit Jack in the back of the head. Jack slumped forward. Jack eased him back up and was looking him right in the face when he was hitting the right temple by a frangible exploding bullet fired from the intersection of the triple underpass and the picket fence by a soldier of fortune, Frank Sturgis, who may have been the best shot in the world at the time. Meanwhile, there was a police officer, a Dallas police officer by the name of Roscoe White on the grassy knoll, who had the easiest shot, but he would have hit Jackie. They were under strict instructions. She should not be harmed. She'd even been given a big bouquet of red roses, which I think was to signal that, this was a stop. This was do not hit, do not harm Jackie. So he had to pull his shot. It wound up in the grass where a lieutenant picked it up out of the grass. Lyndon Johnson's personal hitman, Malcolm Mack Wallace, was not on the west end of the alleged assassin's lair, from which no shots were fired, but on the east side, the opposite side of the building, firing at John Connolly, Governor Lyndon's buddy, who had been his campaign manager, in the mistaken belief it was Ralph Yarborough, the liberal Texas senator whom Lyndon despised. He and Jack had a huge argument that morning where Lyndon wanted to get Connolly out and Yarborough in, but Jack overruled him on the ground that the chief executive of the state should ride with the chief executive of the United States. There wasn't time to get the word to the shooters. So the fact is it had benefits politically, because it obfuscated the motives to have Connolly. No one would think that Lyndon would ever have allowed his closest crony to be in the line of fire. Mac Wallace, by the way, had murdered a dozen people for Lyndon, including one of his own sisters.
So that's a lot more information that I have ever heard, and I need to get your book on the JFK thing and check into that more.
Yeah, you like the new book? Yeah, this is the new book now, just brand new book out now. See,
what's this one called?
JFK JFK, Who, How, and Why.
Okay.
2017.
JFK,
It's got 529 pages. It's got 1,039 photos and images, including 486 of the frames of the Zapruder film.
okay, cool. Definitely ordering that. Right on. Well, let's. All right. So that's about definitive on JFK. We've done JFK a couple of times now.
So there are a couple. There are a couple more of these releases that are significant. Here's one.
Okay.
FBI interview with a fellow named Homer Echeverria, who was an anti-Castro Cuban who belonged to an organization, I believe it was the November 7th organization, who had contact with an FBI informant who wrote, informant advised Chicago office that the subject, that's Echeverria, was member of anti-Castro Cuban group. Subject allegedly approached informant to provide machine guns for Cuban Revolution. On 11/21, that's a day before the assassination, subject allegedly told informant, "We now have plenty of money. Our new backers are Jews. As soon as we or they take care of Kennedy." Subject expressed a favorable attitude toward LBJ.
So
here's another.
We went over that one a little bit because we always, we somehow seem to find out that small rootless tribe of cosmopolitans seem to be behind a lot of things that have happened in the world.
Yes, that's 100% correct. Here's a very interesting one. I don't believe it's from the same informant, although in the context, it was part of a larger report that says on September 16, 1965, this same source reported that the KGB residency in New York City received instructions approximately September 16, 1965, from KGB headquarters in Moscow to develop all possible information concerning President Lyndon B. Johnson's character, background, personal friends, family, and from which quarters he derives his support and his position as President of the United States. Our source added that in the instructions from Moscow, it was indicating that now the KGB was in possession of data purporting to indicate that President Johnson was responsible for the assassination of the late President John F. Kennedy. And here's another interesting one. JFK files confirm CIA had over 40 journalists who were undercover CIA agents. Now, this was Operation Mockingbird in the late 1950s. By the time that William Colby, who is then its director, testified to Congress in 1975, he told them that the agency owns everyone of significance in the media. And at that point in time, there was no distinction between the alternative and the media, that the agency owned everyone of significance in the media. He meant they owned them all. Today, it's much, much worse.
Oh,
most of these newspapers have given up even on investigative journalists. They don't do it because they're getting their scripts supplied to them by the CIA. So there's such a vast infiltration. I even refer to the New York Times as the Langley newsletter. I mean, it's that bad. And there are CIA reps in every newspaper in the country except for the smallest, and in all the TV stations. The only two shows I found that tend to be reporting anything approximating the truth are both on Fox. Tucker Carlson, who seems to not understand the ubiquitousness of conspiracies, but in other respects is admirable in his intelligence, his clarity of articulation, his ability to reason logically. And Sean Hannity. Hannity was throughout the campaign the most, just to use their old slogan, fair and balanced of anyone on television in discussing the campaign. And he's been making, tremendous progress here now with the new evidence about Hillary's collusion with the DNC and paying for the Russian dossier. We have a new book out right now. A friend of mine called me earlier today to tell me that Donna Brazile, the former, head of the DNC before Debbie Wasserman Schultz, former campaign manager for Hillary at some point, has written that they deliberately sabotaged Bernie Sanders' campaign, that Hillary basically took over the DNC and used it as an opportunity to launder money, and that she was calling all the shots, and that Donna Brazile herself even now believes that if, in fact, Bernie Sanders had been allowed to become the nominee, that he might very well be now today the President of the United States, with which I happen to agree.
I don't doubt that. I think that I know Bernie would have done a lot better than Hillary. Now, yeah. Well, there's a complete.
Let me just add, here's the reason. The Boston University and the University of Minnesota conducted a study and discovered that Trump's victory was due to rural counties that had suffered casualties in these endless wars in the Middle East, who judged that he was the more unlikely to continue the wars. In other words, Hillary's reputation as a hawk preceded her. She deserved it. That was well earned. But the fact is that Trump, because he was declaring an end to the wars and that he wanted to reallocate resources to rebuild our infrastructure and so forth, it was that issue, that single issue, that was pivotal. And I say Bernie would have done better because he not only had the same non-interventionist attitude about the wars, which would therefore have appealed to the same voters who wound up voting for Trump, but he had a far more attractive and vibrant domestic agenda. I mean, Trump is going after all kinds of things, even cutting Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, that's disgusting. Those are the programs that have made the most difference to the American people. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, workman's compensation. Those are the programs that have made a difference. I have, really been on the verge of nauseated with the moves that are being made in Congress now just because the Republicans have the majorities in both houses and the presidency.
I don't remember what Bernie's plan was for all that, but I know he was really popular. He would have been a lot more popular than Hillary, and you're probably right. He probably would have won. He would have carried because he had the no more war thing. He was very anti-war, very anti-Iraq, but didn't he vote for Afghanistan twice? I remember something about him voting for Afghanistan back in the day.
I can't recollect precisely, but I'll tell you by the campaign, it was very obvious he was a non-interventionist. He thought it had been a huge mistake. I mean, we all, from time to time, make mistakes, but Bernie was well known for his opposition to the war, and I think that would have been decisive here among the very voters who put Trump over, because Bernie's largesse with regard to, governmental benefits for the social programs that matter to the American people, I think would have carried the day over Trump.
Yeah. I don't know. The world may never know because it's too late now. But I think one of my areas of expertise as a professional philosopher was in the area of subjunctive and counterfactuals, where subjunctives are statements about what would happen if something were to be the case. Counterfactuals are about what would happen if something were to be the case, where their antecedent, the would part, is false. That's why they're called counterfactuals. And I'm applying an analysis of counterfactual that if Bernie had run against Trump, he would have won. Oh, yeah.
I can give you a lot of reasons for.
I get what you're saying now. But that's, but the thing with Hillary and Donna Brazile, a lot of people, I mean, Elizabeth Warren is throwing her under the bus now. And even CNN is like, is this, I think the entire Democratic party and the entire, Democratic Party contraption is just like, I think they're going to distance themselves from Hillary. I think she's done. I think this is
absolutely.
Hopefully.
Hillary is now toast. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And you have, the DNC is separating itself. This is part of the reason for this truck attack in Manhattan.
Let's get into. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the truck attack, because that was.
Let me just review a couple of the reasons why. Hillary Clinton lied, paid for Trump dossier. I mean, there's this really disgusting Judiciary Chair calls for special prosecutor probe of Uranium One deal. It was Hillary who was working with the Russians. It wasn't Trump. It was Hillary. Democrats distance themselves from Hillary. New DNC denies knowledge of Trump dossier funding. FEC complaint alleges Hillary DNC broke election law by not disclosing Trump-Russia dossier funding. I mean, there's a lot more of that. Then we have this indictment by Paul Manafort by Mueller, which is really ridiculous. I mean, here's a wonderful statement by Corey Lewandowski, who is the campaign manager for Trump in the beginning. My initial thoughts are very clear. Paul Manafort did something in 2006, a decade before he was brought on as a volunteer of the Trump campaign. Then he should be accountable for that. He and his associate Rick Gates have now been indicted on 12 counts of money laundering and probably tax evasion and other things which have absolutely nothing to do with the campaign, have nothing to do with the Russia investigation, have nothing to do with the president. Let me ask you this. If the public reports are true, and there was a time that Paul Manafort was under a FISA warrant before coming to the Trump campaign, why is it that the FBI never reached out to me as a campaign manager, never reached out to Donald Trump to say, look, you might want to pause for a second and consider before you take this guy on as a volunteer to hut delegates for you? They never did that. He was under a FISA warrant supposedly before and after his tenure at the campaign. And the FBI never notified the leading presidential candidate for a major Republican Party race, never notified him of a potential problem. This is a problem with the FBI, if you ask me, and I agree with him 100%. Well, we also have, you see, the fiasco in Las Vegas. We got the FBI saying they're not going to release any more evidence about the Las Vegas massacre. Why? Well, here's the latest report we have. Undercover high-def video shows FBI cleanup inside the Route 91 venue following the October 1st massacre. And get this, undercover high-definition video captured days after the October 1st massacre took place reveals no evidence of bullet strikes on, at, or in any part of the venue, which hosted the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival. Not one bullet strike can be seen in the footage, which raises more questions than answers. We also have the Las Vegas coroner's office on lockdown. But why? Well, the answer is obvious. They don't have any death certificates. They don't have any autopsy reports because nobody died.
Thank you. I've been saying this. I've been saying this for a while. As I've been saying this for a while. Not only, I don't even care. I mean, I know that nobody's dead. I know that nobody's gotten shot, but I don't even care that the 50 people. I want to see the 500 people that didn't die. I want to see, the guys that got winged. Somebody got one in the foot. Somebody got it in the shoulder. Somebody got it in the leg. There's none of those people have stepped forward and given interviews. There's nothing. This is absolutely nothing. This is a way bigger thing than Sandy Hook. This is a complete and utter fabrication.
Oh yeah. Well, so it's on a par with Sandy Hook, but the point is well taken. I mean, it's just nonsense. It's just complete nonsense.
What were you going to say, Adam?
Let me tell you how they did it, if I haven't already explained it. I mean, this is the bare bones treatment. They had a pre-recorded soundtrack that was too high quality to have been real, actually 24-bit, that they played over the concert, the PA system. And it included the sound of strikes on hard surfaces. That's why some people who were there would say, well, I actually heard the bullets hit hard surfaces because it was pre-recorded. Then they had visual special effects, such as lights flashing on the fourth floor of the Mandalay Bay, a fourth floor right in the middle of the hotel, lights flashing to simulate a machine gun, and on floors above it, three shot light blasts to simulate American military weapons, which they fire in 3-shot blasts. There was even a guy in the crowd who crouched down, turned, and fired on the crowd. You can see light, but it's from blanks. These are not real weapons. In fact, when they staged his death in the hotel room in the suite at the Mandalay Bay, they were too casual about it. So you're looking down at his face, and one thing is he's clean shaven, whereas the photographs we have of him, he has a beard. But more importantly, you see shell casings on top of the blood. Now, presumably, when people are dead, they stop shooting. But these shell casings are on top of the blood when they should be underneath the blood. Not only that, but Scott Bennett, who's a former U.S. Army Intel and PSYOPs officer, with his keen eye, noticed some of the shell casings, and they're only a handful there when there should be thousands, had this actually been the location from which the shots were fired. Or for blanks, which have a crimp nose, whereas a regular lead slug comes out and it's an open nose, but the blanks have a crimp nose. He also noticed some CO2 cartridges are used to fire gas-propelled pellet guns. In other words, they were setting it up the way they might stage something in a play or in a theater or what have you, where nobody's going to pay special attention. You're just going for the general effect. They never imagined that the scene would be subjected to such minute scrutiny. The whole thing's a fraud. Here's another wonderful point. They can't get their story straight. According to the official narrative to begin with, the security guard, Jesus Campos, interrupted Paddock, at the end of his shooting spree in Paddock, panicked, shot him, and then committed suicide, right? That was the official story, which had a certain sense to it. Now, they have revised the story, and Campos is supposed to have interrupted him before he began the shooting, and that Paddock was so pissed off he's fired 200 rounds down the hallway to try to take out Campos. I mean, this is absurd. You think in a luxury hotel like this, where there's surveillance cameras on every corner, in every elevator, they wouldn't notice 200 rounds fired down the hallway? The story's completely absurd. So this guy, Jesus Campos, is sitting by to do 5 national interviews, including one with Sean Hannity, when he disappears. The officials say we can't find him anywhere. The next thing we know, he's on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Only now the guy's gained 30 to 50 pounds, doesn't have glasses, he's got a round, fat face. Campos actually had a relatively narrow face, and as I say, was much lighter and wore glasses. Now, so DeGeneres does this interview with him, and the other guard who was supposed to be up there to help him get into the room, an adjacent room when all this took place.
It was a building engineer, I believe it was.
Right, very good, building engineer. But he's reverted to the original story that he came up there at the end, after and ended the shooting and all that. He didn't even have the current story right. And it turns out, surprise, surprise, the Ellen DeGeneres show is owned by MGM, where George Soros had put a short on MGM and Mandalay Bay, where he'll make a lot of money if their stock falls. James Marin, who's the CEO of MGM Mandalay Bay, had sold off 80% of his stock in advance so he could buy it back up when the stock dropped and make a bundle. I mean, this is all just too transparently planned in advance to make a lot of money, promote gun control. There's also the scanner scam aspect, because the Chertoff group has all of these scanners that they had to take out of airports because their safety was indeterminate. I mean, think about this. One of the journalists who was writing about putting these scanners in all the hotels and casinos in Las Vegas was saying it only delays your entry by 30 seconds. Well, when you go to a dentist, they cover you with a lead vest before they subject your teeth to milliseconds of x-ray, milliseconds. There's no telling how much damage can be done to the human body in 30 seconds. So the Chertoff group is just standing by waiting for all these scanners to be put in the resorts and casinos. And as an anonymous source published on 4chan a week or 10 days before the event, the plan is to require them to be in all public facilities, in churches and schools, in malls, everywhere. I mean, he stands to make billions and billions on these totally unsafe products. I mean, this is a very elaborate scam. I think it's also part of, and this is where these other events come in, an effort to unravel the social fabric of the country so that you're no longer going to be secure anywhere. You can't walk down the street and feel secure because some guy in a truck may be coming pell-mell up the sidewalk. You can't go to an outside concert because you may be shot. You just go after one after another. You can't have a peaceful protest as at Charlottesville. You can't even send your kids to school anymore because they may be shot up. And they're using all these fabricated events really to attempt to unravel the social fabric of the United States, where Charlottesville is even being used to take down statues to some of our most notable historic figures.
Hey, Jim.
Thomas Jefferson and even George Washington. Yeah.
I was actually at Charlottesville. I was supposed to be one of the speakers there at the Unite the Right rally. Let's do this. We're at the 1 hour mark. We're gonna take we take a break at 1 hour, and we'll come back and we'll do the second half. I want to get into Charlottesville, your Charlottesville book. If you have anything more to add on Vegas, I have a couple of questions for you, and then we can get into a whole bunch of other stuff. This has been a really great first hour. Guys, we'll be back in. We're gonna play a little song, and we'll be back after this.
nur Aussagen, ihr Mist uns Hass und Neid. Und auch noch heute heucheln sie hätten uns befreit. Die letzte Reichsregierung völkerrechtswidrig in Haft. Unsere Elite massakriert, die Feinde hatten es geschafft. Die Deutschen vogelfrei, die Fremdmächte führten Regie. Totale Umerziehung hieß ab jetzt die Strategie. Ein vorrangiges Grundgesetz, Kappers Geschenk, es gilt noch jetzt. Von den Besatzern, die bis heute nicht gehen, war dieser Staat schon jemals souverän. Ist uns egal und völlig gleich, denn unsere Heimat ist das Deutsche Reich. Die Republik ist uns egal, vollkommen gleich, denn unser Auftrag ist und bleibt das Deutsche Reich, Germania. Langsam Zeit, dass ihr es kapiert. Das Reich hat nie kapituliert. Trotz Raub und Raub, Vertreibung, Mord, besteht in alten Grenzen fort. Durch jedes Haus, durch jeder Ort, das Reich besteht noch immer fort. Mit Umerziehungsplänen für uns bereits im Marschgepäck. Und heute sehen wir die Früchte all dieser ganzen Dreck. So machten sie das Reich handlungsunfähig und zunichte. Und ab 45 schreibt jetzt der Sieger die Geschichte. Von Lüge hat man uns seitdem gelehrt. Doch freie Selbstbestimmung wurde uns verwehrt. Der Tag muss kommen und wir wollen ihn noch erleben, wo freie Deutsche sich eine Verfassung geben. Lass uns durch die Straßen schallen, die Fremdherrschaft muss endlich fallen. Lass uns durch die Gassen hallen, sie sind nur Knechte und Vasallen. Nie mehr, nee, ist uns egal und völlig gleich, denn unsere Heimat ist das Deutsche Reich. Die Republik ist uns egal, vollkommen gleich, denn unser Auftrag ist und bleibt das Deutsche Reich, Germania. Wird langsam Zeit, dass ihr es kapiert. Das Reich hat nie kapituliert. Trotz Raub und Raub, Vertreibung, Mord, besteht in alten Grenzen fort. Durch jedes Haus, durch jeder Ort, das Reich besteht noch immer fort.
Henker von euch verbunden. Ich hab das Deutsche Reich.
Die Zeit ist reif für uns und unser deutsches Reich, denn Dunkelheit beherrscht uns hier schon viel zu lang. Kommt den Tyrann! Die Zeit ist reif für unsere Heimat, unser Reich, denn Dunkelheit beherrscht uns hier schon viel zu lang. Schon viel zu lang! Die Zeit ist reif für uns und unser deutsches Reich, denn Dunkelheit beherrscht uns hier schon viel zu lang. Kommt den Tyrann! Die Zeit ist reif für unsere Heimat, unser Reich, denn Dunkelheit beherrscht uns hier schon viel zu lang. Ein Volk, ein Reich!
All right. right, everybody, we're back. This is still the Paranormies Presents the Ahnenerbe Hour. I'm still Johnny Monoxide with Adam Haidt, Scott Taylor. We are talking with Mr. Jim Fetzer. We've been discussing Vegas, JFK, and Sandy Hook. We're going to finish up with some more Vegas stuff here. Adam, you had some things on Vegas you wanted to talk about, right?
Oh, I just wanted to continue it. Just anything that, because it happened so recently, and then we've had so much other stuff to talk about. We haven't had a ton of time to revisit anything that we might have missed.
Well, let me give you a couple of clues. The FBI has announced it's not going to release any more of its findings about Las Vegas. And did I already mention that there were no bullet strikes? I think we maybe hit that before.
We touched on, we touched on that a little bit. Yeah, there's no bullet strikes.
And the Clark County Coroner's office is closed because they don't have any death certificates or autopsy reports to release. So rather than be embarrassed by being besieged, a Facebook friend wrote me that the three closest hospitals to the scene, she had made contact with them, and of course, if you got 500 wounded, they're going to all be overflowing. And none of them had received any gunshot victims. And one of them said, I think you're calling about the drill. You might want to talk to the local police, but there weren't any gunshot victims. This is very analogous to when Sandy Hook took place. That Paul Preston, who was a superintendent of schools in the L.A. area, reached out. It didn't look right to him. It didn't feel right. So he reached out to his contacts in the Obama Department of Education, and all of them confirmed to him that it had been a drill, that no children had died, and that was done to promote gun control. I mean, yeah. So here got similar from the hospital. No, it was actually a drill, and nobody was shot. Okay, right. So we got further confirmation because I think I mentioned before we concluded the first hour how I have a researcher who's looked at 33 of the videos and found lots of sounds of shots, but no real shots. There are lots of fake heroism here, and that's because people could act as though they're being heroic. You hear the sound of shots, coming over the PA system. You see the lights flashing, but they know it's a fraud. They know nobody's being, so they throw people into pickup trucks and all that. Mind you, if anyone had actually been injured there by real gunshots, if you pick somebody up and put them in a pickup truck, you might be bringing about their death. I mean, this is not something that one would do if the situation were real. But because it was fake, because they knew it was fake, we even have a photograph of a mortuary coming up with 3 bodies that are being transferred into a nondescript ambulance. They're providing bodies for the Las Vegas event. Here's one of the best. I think it was Intel Hub that discovered this footage. 17 ambulances in front of Hooters. So they thought, wow, they're really covering up, because, of course, you almost certainly know that there were other reports from the Bellagio, from the Flamingo, from New York, they had their lobbies shot out, right? Well, they thought they'd found the granddaddy of them all, that there'd been a mass slaughter at Hooters, because there were 17 ambulances. But when you look at the inside footage, it's a bunch of crisis actors, each of whom has a sheet, because they're waiting to be taken out on a stretcher to be bodies for the Las Vegas shooting. I mean, this is so ridiculous. This is so phony. This is so totally fake. I mean, it's embarrassing if anyone knows the actual evidence which I'm describing to be taken in is beyond belief. I have another student, Mona Alexis Presley, who has, while I was on with you, I finished, but just before I came on, finished her second blog. She has been going through the obituaries, and she had previously done 19 of the obituaries and found they were fabricated based on people who died in other states on other dates and from other causes of death. 19. And now she's doing more, and it turns out many of the others who are shown as among the dead are Photoshop variations on the faces of those who are already reported to be dead. I mean, it's that blatant, it's that bad. This whole thing is a total and complete sham. Very, very embarrassing. Very stunning. Gross. So, of course, they want to divert attention from all these findings that are coming out about Las Vegas. And then you got Paul Manafort, being indicted, but it's really a phony. It's got nothing to do with the Russia investigation because there was no Russia hacking. The whole meme was made up by Bobby Mook and John Podesta within 24 hours of Hillary's concession speech. They made it up. There's a new book out by two investigative journalists who actually followed Hillary's campaign, published this year. Shattered is the name of it. And they report right in the book, but you're not hearing it from the mainstream media, that Robbie Mook and John Podesta made it up. And they wanted to divert attention from the miserable campaign they'd run and from the contents of the WikiLeaks revelations, which led right to Pizzagate, because John Podesta is the pedophile in chief. This guy is one of the most disgusting creatures on the face of Earth. And, of course, they wanted to divert attention from the fact that Hillary is the one doing shady deals with Russia, selling off 20% of our uranium deposits. And guess where they're located? Under the Bundy Ranch. I mean, this is just so disgusting, it's beyond belief.
Wow. Under the Bundy Ranch.
Yeah.
I actually wasn't aware of that.
Now Levon Finnegan gets shot because Hillary Clinton's doing selling off 20% of American uranium to Russia for a $145 million bribe.
That's wow.
Yeah, I don't know if the Clintons are going to be able to get away with this one.
No, they aren't. That's why everyone's they're being abandoned on the right and left. But you wouldn't believe the contortions this Rachel Maddow is trying to go through some song.
Oh, I saw that. I saw that. Rachel, first of all, I can't stand that guy. But second of all, watching her on that show, it was just like, you could see that she was lying, and I don't know if she was okay with it, or like that's just she's getting paid to do it. But like you're like, right, contortion is the proper word there. It was like you could see her squirming. It just horrible.
MSNBC is CIA light. CNN is straight CIA. And 100 of their members are dual U.S. Israeli citizens. 100 of those are CNN.
Oh yeah. Well, you've got Wolf Blitzer he was a former editor of the Jerusalem Post. I mean, like you got Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper was when he went to Stanford. It's in his CNN bio. He interned at the CIA all 4 years that he went to Stanford. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious that these guys are CIA and Jews. So yeah,
that's right. And MSNBC is CIA light with a feminist twist. I guarantee you, Rachel is also CIA. And you say she's a guy. You want to hear something even more stunning, which you may or may not already be aware. The leading candidate right now for the Democratic nomination in 2020 is Michelle Obama.
Speaking
who
of
is
traps.
A guy. Michelle Obama is a transgender.
Yes.
Michelle Obama has a package that most women do not have.
Yes, that's definitely true. I've been a firm believer of that for a long time.
I think
Brock had this torrid affair with Rahm Emanuel in Chicago before he
Hold on a second. You're saying he was Rahm Emanuel, and I knew Obama was gay, but I didn't know that he was banging the chief of the Mossad's kid, or it was the other way around.
Rahm Emanuel and Barack Obama had this torrid affair. There's this famous men's bathhouse in Chicago. I mean, notorious. Yeah, I mean this was part of their legacy. I mean, Obama actually was born in Kenya. This is another one of these absurdities where they trash Trump for speaking the truth. He was born in Kenya, raised in Indonesia. I mean, the whole story in Obama is really disgusting, completely disgusting. They even took out a woman who was going to talk about the Hawaiian birth certificate, which was a complete fabrication. I had a guy on my show when I was doing a straight radio show years and years ago, and we went through the long form, and there were, 30, 40 indications that it was fabricated. I have found what appears to be the real birth certificate for Obama from Kenya. They created a fake one, however. I mean, it's obviously fake. The real one has his footprint on it. I mean, it's a child's. In Kenya, they celebrate him as the first Kenyan president.
This is true, yeah. I mean, his brother, Malik Obama, has actually even, it's a joke now, his Twitter account, but, Malik has actually, told the truth about him, Yeah. Oh man, that's the joke about Rachel Maddow, just because she looks like a dude. That's why I say that. I always say that her and Peyton Manning were separated at birth, but they both have that same giant horse face.
Clever. Rachel is a clever woman, and there was a point in time when I used to think she was pretty good, but she's become so perverted in her presentation of the news.
I don't doubt that she's CIA. I mean that.
Yeah, Lawrence O'Donnell is another. I cannot abide the man. His arrogance, his ignorance. Chris Matthews, of course, still thinks that Lee Oswald shot JFK. I mean, that's his state of naivete.
Right.
He thinks 19 Islamic terrorists hit us on 9/11. I mean,
well, I know people. I know a lot of people that believe that the 19 terrorist thing as well. But baby steps, though, Jim. Baby steps. But you really think he believes that, or is that just he's putting that front out there because he's on the news?
Oh, I think Chris Matthews believes it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Well, I do. I don't think he's all that clever. He thinks of himself as super smart, but he's quick and articulate, but he's just doesn't have depth of intellect. He's very superficial.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So we've gone all over the place. With the Rahm Emanuel thing is just shocking to me because I remember, like, you remember the Alex Jones thing where he's talking about Rahm Emanuel when they're talking about people. It's like somebody mentions his name, he stabs the table with the knife. Dead. He's dead. This guy's dead. I mean, I never pictured him as one of them. But hey, but then again, he's Israeli, and in Israel, bisexuality and homosexuality is pretty rampant. So.
Is that a fact?
Yes. That's
pretty damn interesting.
Well, I mean, come on, you think about it. You think about these people in general. I mean, like, it's they're pretty sexually deviant in general. You Harvey Weinstein's and every deviant that's coming out of Hollywood is a Jew. I don't know how many goys have come out in this Hollywood scandal so far. Like what, Spacey? That's about it. And I think all the rest
and
of
then
them
he's trying to say that his dad was like a Nazi, and it's like, wow, never heard that one before.
Right? Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't. Okay, so we're going to use the gay excuse and the Nazi excuse. If they don't buy that, we're fucked. Like, But no, the Rahm Emanuel thing is shocking to me. It's hilarious. I mean, I believe I don't doubt it, but like I never would have thought that. I always thought Rahm was would have been more of a womanizer. But anyways, so you have another book coming out. You said it's coming out in the next 10 days on Charlottesville. So let's talk about Charlottesville because I was one of the speakers that was scheduled to speak there. It was myself, Mike Enoch from TRS, The Right Stuff. We had Christopher Cantwell from Radical Agenda, Augustus Invictus, Jason Kessler was, the head organizer. Richard Spencer was supposed to speak there. Baked Alaska was on the bill. We had some additions that weren't on the bill, but we had Asmodor from the Daily Stormer was going to speak. We had, I don't even remember now who else was on there. Matthew Heimbach from the Traditionalist Workers Party. Let me see who else. I think that might have been it for the headline speakers. But yeah, none of us got to speak because as we came to the park, we had our little caravan of vans. We had our security. We got directed where we were supposed to go. What happened first was we were granted an injunction so that we could actually use the park to do what we were supposed to do because they pulled our permit and said we weren't allowed to use Lee Park. So basically what happened, it turned into like a free-for-all, and the cops were like, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. You got your injunction. You guys are going to have this half of the park, and Antifa is going to have this half of the park. Well, when they directed us in, they directed us to come in our caravan. We got out of the vans and started walking, and we were walking through a gauntlet of screaming, rabid leftists, shitlibs, Antifa, Black Lives Matter. Yeah. And we were getting... frozen water bottles, rocks, bottles of piss. I got sprayed with pepper spray. You know, a lot of us got pepper sprayed. We got sprayed with some other stuff, which turned out we thought it was acid. It was actually a base, like a very strong base. I still have a scar on the back of my hand from that. You know, these people were just animals, and all we wanted to do was get into the park and talk about, you know, hey, it's okay to be white. It's okay to have, you know, white people founded this nation, you know, and we're not going anywhere, and our history isn't going anywhere. And by taking down statues of Robert E. Lee and you know, and all these Confederate generals, that you are erasing, you know, American history, white American history. And we've told them before that I've said this before. They're not just going to stop with the Confederate monuments. They're going to continue there, and now they're going after George Washington. I mean, that's a whole other thing.
But
yes,
it's insane. It's absolutely insane. You had this woman, Angela Ray, who used to be on the executive committee of the Congressional Black Caucus, calling for all Washington, Jefferson, and Lee monuments to be taken down. That would include the Jefferson Memorial and the Washington Monument in the District of Columbia. I mean, it's this lunatic. And look, it's core here. When invaders come into another country, they tear down the statues of the leaders of that country so they'll forget their identity, their history. That's what's going on here. It's an effort to obliterate our history. This is part of an attempt to unravel American culture, to make us fall apart, lose track of our history. And too many are falling for it. Too many have an excess of political correctness and can no longer think straight. I cannot believe what an obstacle to clear thinking is political correctness. I mean, you know, my God, we had this Barack Obama who did immense damage to the United States, including nullifying the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 that precluded the use of the same techniques of disinformation and propaganda within the United States being used without, by means of the National Defense Appropriation Act of 2013, signed in time to bring us Sandy Hook. And we've had just an endless sequence ever since, from Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, San Bernardino, Charleston, Charlottesville, now Las Vegas. Who was it? Somebody made the comment that, you know, it may have been Steve Pachinik, saying how about, Las Vegas is clearly a Trump effort because it has to be bigger and better. So it's got to be the biggest shooting with the most deaths than ever before. When I first saw an article on the front page of the Wisconsin State Journal about this, it had an article about the Paddock being a multimillionaire, you know, and all that. I mean, the most unlikely candidate to be a mass killer, right? Why would a multimillionaire kill anybody? He's got what he wants. He's comfortable. He didn't have any ideology. He didn't have religious views. He didn't have political convictions. And as you correctly observed earlier, his girlfriend said that he was so sensitive, his allergies were so strong. She knew I couldn't use perfume. She couldn't use hairspray. She could not even take a bubble bath. So that if, in fact, he'd actually been firing this massive number of rounds, in fact, the room would have been completely consumed with this massively polluting residue from the firing. He would have killed himself by doing it. I mean, it's just one of the stupidest scenarios I've ever seen. And that's because it's all fabricated. It's all made up. It's totally phony from beginning to end.
It is. There's no way about it. I mean, have you seen the picture? Of course, everybody's seen the picture of Paddock and his girlfriend where he's holding that shot of tequila or wherever in his hand.
With his eyes closed.
With his eyes closed, yeah. Have you seen the picture that actually it's in a YouTube video and I don't have it. I should have pulled it up beforehand. But it's the arm is actually photoshopped in to another picture. His actual left arm is actually down at his side, and he's not actually holding the shot. I don't know why they would Photoshop somebody else's hand in there to show him holding a drink, but that's not even a real picture. I don't even know if Stephen Paddock is even a real person at this point. What about? I mean, like you've got the dad.
That's very interesting because Mona Alexis Presley has been doing all this research, spends a fair amount of time in this latest blog, which I just put up. If you go to jamesfetzer.blogspot.com, you'll find her latest research on this. She believes that he and his brother are one and the same. In other words, there is no Stephen Paddock. There's only the brother.
Okay. The crazy brother that gets everything comped? Yeah.
The guy who's been outed as having child porn on his computer. Now, that's easy to fake.
Right.
You know,
that one, well, there's two brothers. There's the brother from Florida who decided to start talking. First, it was like, he didn't know anything about his brother. You remember that? The first interview where he's like, it's all the public record. It's all in the public record. You know, he graduated from college. He got a job. He did, he was very, very, like, vague about everything about his brother. And then the very next interview, it seemed like he was, like, coked out of his mind, where he's talking about, my brother made our family wealthy. We used to get thousands of dollars of sushi comped, and, like, we did this.
All comped.
All comped, yeah. That's kind of a running joke around our circles, is the comped thing. But then the other brother shows up out of nowhere, and the brother lived on Laurel Canyon Lane. And if anybody's listening knows anything about Laurel Canyon, yes,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think they threw that in there as like a. I think they threw that in as like an Easter egg. That's an Easter egg, I think, for us conspiracy theorists. I think they threw that in as like a video game Easter egg.
I call us conspiracy realists. Actually, when Mona first submitted, she had signed her name, Mona Alexis Presley, conspiracy realist, because I did an interview. Actually, the Millennium Report. I discussed this with him. Published a big piece entitled "Conspiracy Realists: The Arch Enemies of the CIA," because in an interview I'd once done with WCCO, a TV station out of Minneapolis. I was on the way to a conference on JFK in Dallas, and they asked how I preferred to be referenced, and I said, I prefer conspiracy analyst, or even better, conspiracy realist, because I, like Michael Moore, who replied when asked, do you believe in conspiracy theories, said, only those that are true. That's what I do, is I take conspiracy theories from theories in the weak sense of conjectures, rumors, or speculations to conspiracy theories in the strong sense of empirically testable explanatory hypotheses, so you can sort out whether they're true or false. But an indispensable element of that is separating the authentic evidence from the inauthentic. That's where some of these people went off on a tangent. Even Mike Adams of Natural News is a very good guy. When my book was banned by Amazon, Mike Adams published 3 articles about it, one of which was an interview with me. So I hold Mike Adams in high esteem. I mean, Project Censored turned out to be completely phony, a cover-up, a limited hangout. They never even mentioned the book. It was the biggest event of the year in terms of censorship and suppression, but they never have mentioned a word about it, and that really does piss me off. So that, and then of course when I got tossed from the Rents, from rentsradio.com, Jeff Rents bounced me. I had notified him a couple of days in advance that Scott Bennett, who had his own show called Shelled Games on Rents, and I were going to be leaving. I didn't specify the network, but we were going to be leaving on the 1st of November. And I think that gave him pause, and he wanted to figure out a way to explain why I was gone. So that after my show on the 19th of October, where I brought in an audiovisual expert who was saying that he'd been playing around with the audio and he was now convinced that it was too high quality, had been pre-recorded, it was played over the network, that it was 24-bit, so that the receivers, the cell phones and laptops and so forth, would pick it up in sufficiently clear definition that you could actually hear the sound of shots hitting hard surfaces. Well, we know now, for example, from a high-def TV to confirm that there were no shots hitting the pavement. And, of course, all the evidence points in the same direction. This is all totally fabricated. But the fact of the matter is I also had Mona on to talk about the research she'd been doing into the obituaries and discovering that in 19 cases, the first one she'd studied, they'd all died in different states or on different dates or from different causes of death. So the whole thing's fraudulent. When you throw in this business about Hooters, which I believe I already sketched, where we had outside, 17 ambulances, but inside you had a bunch of crisis actors with sheets who were bored stiff, waiting their turn to be carried out in stretchers as additional victims of the Las Vegas massacre. I mean, you're ready to barf. I mean, the whole thing is so blatant and it's so phony. It's a total fraud and deception. Now, in Charlottesville, we had a production, a stage production in 3 acts. The first act was Friday night, the torchlit parade up to the statue of Thomas Jefferson, which causes students at Mr. Jefferson's University to surround the statue. That was really intended just to draw the attention of the state, of the nation, to Charlottesville, because the real event were the following day, where Soros had paid for the buses bringing in Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and they were clearly instructed to display the most despicable possible behavior, where the Charlottesville police were ordered to stand down, that even though you had your permit, because the Charlottesville police were ordered to stand down, the governor used and the mayor and the governor were key players here too, used the state police to channel you into a direct confrontation with the Antifa and Black Lives Matter, which the Charlottesville police would have prevented. In fact, several of them have spoken up subsequently to say it was all wrong, that the mayor would force them to stand down when they wanted to perform their job. Now, while that was going on at the park a few blocks away, you had this completely staged event involving automobiles. Now, there was a fellow who was actually walking along, keeping track. He was broadcasting about it. Let me find his name to be precise about it. He actually may have been serving as an audio-video coordinator by being at the right place at the right time. This is the Ford Fisher live stream, because he was recording protesters coming south on 1st Street, then the Dodge Challenger heading east on Water Street, then the maroon van parked at the intersection of 4th and Water. I mean, that maroon van was left empty with no driver for 5 minutes before the event started to unfold. It's just ridiculous the way this whole thing was done. We have 3 different video studies about this that expose what happened. First was entitled Charlottesville False Flag Theory, Something Strange is Going On. Very, very nice piece where she has her cat. It's like a talking cat that represents her, but she's going through. We have one that I did with Dean Ryan entitled Charlottesville, the Charlottesville PSYOP with Jim Fetzer and Dean Ryan. And then I interviewed Ole Dommegard, the real deal Ole and Jim from Virginia, Spain. And in each of these, it's very clear, there were 2 cars. There were 2 Dodge Challengers. One had a black stripe, one didn't. One had a sunroof, one didn't. There were 2 different drivers who had virtually the same name. One was James A. Fields, who was a 20-year-old diagnosed as schizophrenic on antipsychotic medicine who wore prescription glasses. The other's a 32-year-old, very athletic, James G. Field, who commands a reserve battalion in Ohio. When you look at the driver, it's clearly the latter, James G. Field, the 32-year-old who commands a battalion, who crashes the car and backs it up with unbelievable skill. I mean, that would be the envy of a NASCAR driver. I could not have backed that vehicle up at that speed with that precision. Now, there were 3 different takes. One of them has only 1 vehicle in the vicinity. There's nothing beside it, just the 1 vehicle. And in none of these do they actually hit anybody, by the way. Then there's a second take where there's a black Toyota pickup truck beside it. But then there's a third where you have the maroon van. They bring in another white van, and the car comes in and crashes into the white van and the maroon van, and neither of them has drivers in it because they didn't want them to suffer whiplash, have a broken back, or whatever. So Ole's video showed there was no driver in either of the vans at the time, and the whole thing was clearly staged. It was ridiculous. I wound up writing to 75 members of the Department of History at the University of Virginia, and I included all 3 of these videos. And I said, two cars, 2 drivers, 2 takes equals totally fake. And I explained how I had myself been a visiting associate professor at Virginia in 1977-78, how I'd been brought back as a visiting full professor spring semester of 1984-85. I didn't get a response from anybody except one woman who said she was embarrassed that I had anything to do at the University of Virginia, when I'm the only one who's speaking out about the fraud and the abuse of Mr. Jefferson's University. I can assure you, Thomas Jefferson would have been on my side, not that of the Department of History. I wrote to the president, the provost, the vice president, the vice provost. I sent them the same information. I wrote to the Board of Visitors. That's the equivalent of the regents. They oversee Mr. Jefferson's University. I wrote to 3 members of the city council. I had 1 member of the city council who initially expressed a willingness to come on on my show to talk about it, subsequently didn't, who voted with everyone else about removing the statues. I mean, it's just a disgrace. They know better. I'm informing them. They're disregarding the evidence. They're going ahead and acting like blockheads. Excess of political correctness. The governor wants to run for president, Terry McAuliffe. He's very corrupt. There are a lot of stories go about him. He's a crony of Hillary Clinton. I think his prospects are going to be severely tarnished by the truth emerging about the corruption of Hillary and her massive bribe from Russia to sell off 20% of the American uranium.
So, Jim, I'm curious what you think about the helicopter crash that occurred there, because I have heard almost nothing about it since it happened. Not even oh, it's fine, like nothing weird happened. And there's also that I've seen a picture, or I think it was a YouTube video of the crash helicopter. It was downed in a forest nearby, and there was another helicopter just kind of hanging out around it, probably just checking out what happened. But why is nobody what is the deal?
Because nobody died there. There's another video. You can find it. It's called The Two Virginia Cops Who Died in the Crash. Well, think again. I'm looking at a photograph of the two of them. They're still in their pilot's uniforms from the crash. They survived. They didn't die. That's why you're not hearing about it. They didn't die.
What caused the crash? Was that like a diversion they wanted to set up and then realized they didn't need it or it didn't work out?
I'm also looking at a photograph, fiery aftermath caught on video, Charlottesville chopper crash. The fiery aftermath of the police helicopter crash in Varsville, Virginia was captured on video obtained by TMZ. The chopper exploded in a ball of flames in a residential neighborhood Saturday afternoon. The person who shot the video lives across the street from where the helicopter crashed. He tells TMZ he heard a loud noise coming from the helicopter and felt it was hovering too low. I'll just tell you, I've got a frame from this other video. The cops are just fine, and I've got it right beside the photographs of the two cops, and it's the two guys, except that the heavier guy, who's shorter, is on the left in the photograph of the two of them in their Virginia State Trooper uniforms. Their left and right is reversed, that's all. And the other guy who's taller, they're both bald. I mean, I'm telling you, I got them right here. I can send you a copy of it. I mean, it's real easy to find. I mean, this is just more fakery. If something happens that's inconsistent with the story, they just don't report it. They ignore it, see? Mm-hmm. The principle is if you don't hear it on TV, it didn't happen. So, they reported that they were killed in a helicopter crash to gain empathy, but they didn't die. There was a crash, but they weren't harmed. They survived. They're just fine.
Okay. I can see just trying to make the violence seem to be worse.
Right.
If they can be like, oh, look, these evil, racist, Nazi, KKK, white supremacists, crashed a helicopter, but maybe they realized, that one wasn't going to work out.
Well, right. They still use the whole, when they talk about Charlottesville, leftists and whatever, they talk about, 3 people died at Charlottesville, Heather Heyer and those 2 police officers. They still mention that the cops died. And that's the other thing. It's
not true. And even the report about Heather, the report I have is she died of a heart attack.
Yeah, her mother came out and said that she died of a heart attack. Her mom,
this wasn't a death caused by the car crash.
This is a death caused by too many donuts.
They're lying about right. She ate too many donuts. They're lying about everything. Everything. Like Las Vegas, Charlottesville, Las Vegas, Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, for crying out loud. The police were on bullhorns calling out, this is a drill, this is a drill. It was the tail end of the marathon. If you actually want to kill people, you wouldn't wait till the tail end. The Boston Globe was tweeting that a demonstration bomb will be set off during the marathon for the benefit of bomb squad activities. A second tweet, one will be set off in front of the library in a minute, and 1 minute later, one of these puff pieces goes off in front of the Boston Public Library. I was an artillery officer in the Marine Corps. I tell you, these were puff pieces. They couldn't have killed anyone unless maybe you were actually sitting on top of it. So that, when you peered in through the smoke, you saw bodies missing arms and legs, but there was no blood. Well, Lorraine Day, MD, was the head of trauma and surgery for San Francisco General Hospital for 25 years. Observe, this is a physiological impossibility. You cannot have arms and legs blown off by explosives and there to be no blood.
Right.
The blood only showed up later. It was Hollywood blood. It never changed color. We've documented all of this 50 ways
that
from
guy,
Sunday. I tell you,
That guy had his legs blown off in Iraq or something, didn't he? Was he like an Iraq vet or something? The guy with
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, yeah.
Was Army Lieutenant Nick Voigt. He lost his legs and the little finger on his left hand. That's how you know this first Jeff Bauman, who's lying there, is Nick Voigt. Now, if you just lost your legs, you're going to be unconscious from the bleed out in 1 minute, dead in 2. Instead, he's there at least 5 minutes. Under the smoke, there's a guy in a hoodie attaching a false bone prosthesis. In other words, they had a fake bone to make it look more horrifying, okay? And he lies there, delicately keeping his head off the sidewalk, because after all, people spit on sidewalks, right? So he's in such anguish that he can't perform this delicate act of keeping his head off the ground. They wind up putting him into a wheelchair, which is the wrong thing to do if you've had your legs blown off, because then gravity helps to draw the blood out. While they're pushing him off, the false bone prosthesis comes loose, and they have to stop and reattach it. You want to know what happens in the sequel? Like 19 days later, he shows up. It's supposed to be the same guy, Jeff Bauman, at a Boston Bruin game, only now, whereas before his legs appear to be blown up below the knee, now his legs are blown up above the knee. He's very cheerful. He's waving a Boston Bruin flag, and he's got all of his digits. Not the same guy. I had an interview with Stan Monteith, who is an orthopedic surgeon who had actually performed amputations of this kind. He told me it takes 3 months just to get used to not having your legs, and another 3 months to figure out how to get around without them. And this was like 19 days later. Gary King, with whom I do the new JFK show, discovered a third Jeff Bauman at a baseball game. He's wheeled out in a wheelchair. Now he has no legs at all. And the guy wheeling him is the tall guy in the cowboy hat,
who is actually a SAG. He's a SAG actor. He's actually a Screen Actors Director.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right. A Hollywood producer-director pointed out to me he'd cast this guy in one of his own films. When I went to verify it, they'd obliterated all the supporting cast. They just obliterated on the official record for the film. He also told me they use a studio quality smoke machine, and we poured through all the videos and we found it. I was so astonished. I put it on the back cover of the book, and nobody died in Boston either, about half of which is devoted to the completely fraudulent trial of this young man who had nothing to do with it. You see, the alternative media cracked the Boston bombing the very day of the event. They discovered it was these Kraft International personnel wearing khaki trousers, black jackets, black baseball caps with a skull insignia where the motto of Kraft is, "Violence does solve problems." So we got images of two of these guys moving toward the location where a bomb goes off. One is wearing a black nylon backpack with a white square. The bomb that goes off is a black nylon backpack with a white square. He's rushing away, no longer wearing the black nylon backpack with a white square. The FBI confirmed, based on its investigation, both bombs that went off in Boston were in black nylon backpacks. In the indictment for Zoker, it states that the bombs that went off were in black nylon backpack, but Zoker wasn't wearing one. They mucked up when they photoshopped him and his brother into the video. They weren't actually there, which I learned from their aunt. And I asked her how she could tell, and it was because Tamerlan, the older brother, had a beard, but in the video they mocked in, they photoshopped in, he's clean shaven. And I asked, can you prove that? Sure. And she sent me a photo of him lying in bed with his cat. He's got a beard, a link to them working out in a gymnasium before the event. He's got a beard. He was actually called by a friend who was relieved to find they'd been nowhere near the marathon. They had dinner together that night. He had a beard. There's surveillance footage of him outside and Zoker inside a convenience store. He's got a beard. He's arrested and stripped naked in Watertown and put in a police car. He's got a beard. The next time we see him, he's dead with a huge gash in his side, but he's still got the beard. But in the photoshopped image, he's clean shaven. So, and this is the real kicker. They gave Zoker a silver backpack, and they gave Tamerlan a gray or a light brown backpack. I mean, it's ridiculous. I consulted with a retired professor of law, John Remington Graham. Paul Craig Roberts has actually written about him several times because I asked him what of the evidence was most striking to him, and he said that the backpacks don't match. This is like the OJ. If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit, except they guaranteed the glove wouldn't fit because it was a skin-tight fitting glove, and they had him put on latex rubber gloves before he put them on. They knew it wouldn't fit. So that was contrived, but this wasn't contrived. The backpacks don't match. That means there wasn't even probable cause for an arrest, much less an indictment or a conviction at trial. And Judy Wood, who was the defense attorney while she pled them not guilty, in her opening statement said they did it. So the jury never had to review the evidence, would have shown effortlessly they did not do it.
Yeah, the Boston bombing, I called that when it first came out that it was fake. I'm right there with you with all of that. Yeah, I have cousins that live in Massachusetts and argue with me and whatever, and I was like, you realize that all that is, it was a drill gone live just like every other time, just like Sandy Hook, just like shit every single time. I mean, and now with Vegas. Actually, in Vegas, I forgot to bring this up earlier. There's a picture in one of the 4chan posts where it's a time clock from one of the employee, lounges or whatever, wherever you check in to go to work at one of the hotels, and there's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that has on October 1st there will be a mass shooting drill. Everybody is to participate.
Right on the schedule.
It's right there on the schedule.
It's
It's right there on the schedule.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and there,
Speaking of drills, have you heard about this November 4th Day of Rage thing with Antifa?
Well, it's not just that. There's also supposed to be a national drill of the shutdown of our electrical grid.
Oh, Adam,
Right.
you missed that. We did that. We
concern is
talked about that after you got off the Halloween show. Yeah, there's going to be a
Department
grid,
of Defense. It's like a solar event.
DoD. Yep, solar event. Yep.
Well, now that in my opinion is rather scary, because my suspicion has been they've been going bananas over North Korea, which represents no threat to the United States whatsoever. In fact, they're not reporting. But North Korea in 2015, in 2016, and 2017, 3 different times, offered to freeze their ballistic and nuclear program if only the United States would stop acting in a belligerent fashion toward North Korea, including conducting drills on the border with South Korea. It was rejected preemptorily by the Obama administration twice, and now by the Trump administration. So when the Donald goes out there and talks about, the threat posed by North Korea, it's ridiculous. It has no basis whatsoever. Not only that, but, the trillions we've been spending on defense, some of it actually has gone toward defense. Before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld announced $2.3 trillion was missing from the Pentagon budget. Well, guess who was the chief financial officer at the time? Dov Zakheim, who's a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, even a rabbi, who had a flight maintenance system that could take over a flight if it were ever hijacked. I think the original plan was to fly drones into the Twin Towers until they discovered that it was physically impossible to get them into the building, that they would have crumpled external to the building. They wanted to get them into the building before they exploded to have a pseudo-justification for the destruction of the Twin Towers, which was being demolished by a completely different method. In fact, it was a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes that were set off in a sequence to destroy the towers from the top down. But the fact is that Dov Zakheim was the chief financial officer when $2.3 trillion went missing. Now, where do you think that money went? So the Israelis have these vast sums of money. They have great access to sophisticated technology. These hurricanes, several experts concluded the hurricanes were man-made. They were directed from space by lasers, hitting Houston, taking out our great, gas and oil producing center. That would be something that the Israelis might be inclined to do if they wanted to punish the United States because we didn't deliver Syria on a silver platter. The intervention of Russia and the Iranians defeated the CIA-Israeli plan to take out the democratically elected president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, who has like 80% support from his people, overwhelmingly more than any American president, okay? And they don't talk about the fact that we're there to take out the democratically elected president of Syria. Now, the fact is, in the wake of 9/11, the whole plan the beans were spilled by Wesley Clark, who had served as commanding general Allied Forces Europe, which meant he was the commanding general of the NATO. After he returned to the Pentagon, he learned of a plan to invade Iraq, which he and the general informed him were both stunned because Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. And he asked to be kept posted. The next time he came back, he learned from the same general there's a plan in a memo that he just received from the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, to take out the governments of 7 countries in the next 5 years, beginning with Iraq and Libya, ending with Syria and the Persian nation of Iran. This is all for the benefit of Israel. This is all to take out the modern Arab states that serve as a counterbalance to Israel's domination of the region. And we've done a pretty good job of making a mess of the Middle East on behalf of Israel. And millions of people have died at the expense of the American taxpayer on behalf of Israel. And we have corrupted the moral standing of the United States in the eyes of the world beyond belief, where we now are viewed by the rest of the world as a rogue state, as the greatest terrorist state in the world, along with our gallant ally in the Middle East, Israel. That's where things stand today. And now it appears Israel is running the shop. You got Trump increasing the troops in Afghanistan, which is simply absurd, threatening to scuttle the Iran nuclear deal. Our own intel agencies already in 2007 concluded that Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons, which they reaffirmed in 2011. Even the Mossad came aboard in 2012 and admitted Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons just weeks before Bibi Netanyahu went to the UN and asserted precisely the opposite. When Donald Trump went before the United Nations and made a completely hysterical speech threatening the annihilation of a sovereign state, which is a form of genocide precluded by the United Nations Charter, the one voice that said this was a clear, bold statement was that of Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, Trump has become a Netanyahu puppet. It's as obvious as could be. Do you know that Cynthia McKinney revealed years ago now that when new members of Congress arrive in Washington, they're asked to sign a pledge to put the interests of Israel ahead of those of the United States? Where those who
That's I was gonna say that's I think that's a well-known fact to a lot of us. I don't think that the average normie knows about that, but yeah.
I had confirmation from 2 different sources that the number of members in Congress who refused to sign the pledge that are presently seated is 1.
Who's the one? Do you know?
His name is Jones. I think he's a black guy, probably somewhere in the South. You can look it up. You know who has refused to sign the pledge.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I mean, we have.
So, for truth in advertising, let's call ourselves the United States of Israel.
Oh yeah. Well, it all. I mean, we've known that here for a while. The United States is the dog on the leash that Israel has. You've got dual citizens of Israel. How many dual citizens of Israel do we have in our Congress, our House of Representatives, governors, other legislators in this country? You know, how many you know, your Dianne Feinsteins, your Chuck Schumers, you know, I mean, these people are Jews. They're dual citizens of Israel. What other country do you think you could go to and become a legislator in that country while being a dual citizen of another country? None.
Listen
Only
to
here.
this. The first political speech I ever gave was on the 15th of April, 2008, at a Ron Paul Freedom Rally on the grass of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., where I explained that in what would be published as 9/11 and the neocon agenda, how improper it was to have individuals in policy shaping or decision making positions who are dual citizens with another nation, because how could you know that their loyalty to the other nation didn't outweigh their loyalty to the United States, and how the AIPAC was just loaded with these people who were promoting the idea of the United States intervening in the Middle East. They were claiming to secure a new American empire that would endure for the next 100 years, but that was all poppycock. That was just window dressing. They wanted to come in and slaughter the Arab states that served as a counterbalance to Israel's domination, and most of them moved right into the Department of Defense when Bush and Cheney came in after stealing the election in Florida. You see, it was essential to get Bush and Cheney in there to bring us 9/11.
Right.
That's what that was all about.
It totally was. No, I agree with that 100%. Man, we did we finish? I've been so into this now. Did we finish Charlottesville? I don't even remember.
We said
enough about Charlottesville. We got done with Charlottesville. Let's talk about the latest. Talk about the latest.
Yeah.
The New York truck accident.
The new book should be out. The new book should be out within 10 days, and like all the others, it's at moonrockbooks.com. Okay.
Speaking of moons,
my book on the Boston bombing, it's over 500 pages. I think we devote about half of it to the fake trial, the sham evidence. The whole thing was absurd. I mean, Judy Clark figures prime there. She's a big one for cleaning up messy cases. A despicable person. Despicable.
Yeah.
Now, you look
sounds
at
like
the Manhattan thing. Look, you got all this stuff going on that they don't want us to be thinking about. We got the Las Vegas thing falling apart. The FBI, is not going to release any evidence. You got the coroner's office closed. We got Hillary Clinton lied, paid for the Trump dossier. We got Senate Judiciary Chair calls for special prosecutor probe of Uranium One deal. We got the Democrats distancing themselves from Hillary. The new DNC denies knowledge of the Trump dossier. You got the FEC, a complaint alleging Hillary, the DNC, broke election law by not disclosing Trump. Then you got this Manafort thing was completely contrived. I read you what Corey Lewandowski said about it.
Oh, yeah.
Anything to do with Russian hacking. All the Russian involvement was on the side of Hillary and the Democrats. So what could be better than a truck attack in Manhattan, right? And you got a guy who purportedly drives down 20 blocks, taking out people right and left, killing 8, injuring 11. Honest, you got to count me a skeptic because I've been through too many of these before. We had 20 fabricated kids and 6 fabricated adults in Sandy Hook. On 9/11, we had these passenger manifests. None of those 4 aircraft crashed on 9/11. 2 of them were not even in the air. 11 North Tower, 77 Pentagon were not even in the air. The other 2 planes, pilots for 9/11 Truth tracked them and found that Flight 93 was over Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, after it had purportedly crashed in Shanksville. And also that Flight 175 was over Harrisburg and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, long after it had purportedly hit the South Tower. I obtained Federal Aviation Administration records that showed the planes used for those flights. Remember, the same plane could today fly from Chicago to L.A. and tomorrow from Miami to Washington, D.C., right? The planes that were used for those 2 flights were not formally deregistered or taken out of service until 28 September 2005. So how can the planes were even in the air have crashed on 9/11? How can planes that crashed on 9/11 have still been in the air 4 years later? But we got the passenger manifests. I printed them out. I've still got them here. I mean, it's ridiculous. They faked all these people, and they faked all these people in Las Vegas. I mean, the government is spending more time dreaming up and faking these events than they are actually solving crimes or benefiting the American people. So what do we have here? Well, he even left behind, in New York, he even left behind a note from his mother, right? Saying how he was really into ISIS, right? And then it turns out the feds interviewed the suspected truck attacker in 2015 about possible terror ties. That's when they flipped him. That's when he became an informant for the FBI. I'll tell you right now.
So this whole thing is
completely fraudulent. And get this, one of my correspondents, Richard, a very smart guy, wrote me about Fox News coverage last night. Is that apparently Fox spent the whole night dwelling on the terror attack and featuring a parade of Israeli intel officers to make America safe from Islamic terrorists. Fits in with the plan for the Jew world order. I mean, I think that's right. The new world order is one where they rule the world. That's the new world order.
It's the Jew world order. I've been saying that for a very, very long time. And this guy that you said they flipped him. Well, you said they flipped him in 2015, and he said that he had said he really liked ISIS and whatever. He even asked to have an ISIS flag in his hospital room.
It's
How about that?
ridiculous. You see, they're
Yeah.
pitching this at the level of an 8-year-old. That's what they take the American people to have that level of functional intelligence. That's why you have to have a passport that survives the destruction of the two most massive and robust buildings in the world, the Twin Towers. Okay,
That's right.
Two 500,000 steel and concrete buildings are demolished, but a cloth passport survives to implicate the terrorists. We need a name. We need to be told who did it. You see. So they got this guy, and he's even asking for an ISIS flag. What could be more obvious? This is all totally fake. And get this, in case you missed the memo. Back on the 18th of May, a Richard Rojas, 26, drove a 2009 Honda Accord down a busy Times Square street at a high rate of speed before crashing at the intersection of 45th and Broadway. There is no more famous intersection in New York City than Times Square, okay? Now, I got a guy who's a 25-year police officer, 15 years a general detective, who took the whole case apart and published on my blog, the Times Square crash, just another Broadway show. It turned out the vehicle had actually been there the night before under canopy. They had stunt drivers. When you slowed it down in slow motion, you saw the stunt drivers were leaping over the car. They weren't hit by the car. You've even got a director there directing the event. The whole thing was fraudulent, totally fraudulent in New York City. So don't tell me that they can't fake something like this in New York City, because they already did.
That's true. This and to put it past, to put any of this stuff past anybody. Okay, first of all, they run Hollywood. They run the largest imagination factory on the face of the planet. The Jews do. It's Hollywood. You don't think that they can fake, that they run the media. They run the news. They run all the news shows. They run all the fake news shows, the quote unquote real news shows. I mean, like, to think that they couldn't fake something like any of this stuff. And everybody likes to go to Occam's razor with 9/11. Well, of course Arabs would steal an airplane and crash it into the World Trade Center. Why wouldn't they? They hate America.
But that's ludicrous. All the intel agencies agreed that the only entities with the capability to pull this off were the CIA and the Mossad, and on 9/11 they were working together.
Jim, when you say the CIA and the Mossad, you don't have to repeat yourself.
Yeah, I know. Would you believe that between the destruction of the South Tower and the North, they actually played footage of Palestinians rejoicing, giving the impression that they were watching the same scenes we were watching, when in fact it was archival footage from years before for some political or religious event. They just happened to have at their fingertips to play it. That crucial moment when all eyes of the world were on television in New York.
There was one video where they showed a Palestinian woman celebrating and smiling and laughing about it, when the reality was they were actually giving her like candy or something off. You know what I mean? It was like, it was such a staged thing.
Here's the thing to ponder. They just happened to have that at their fingertips at this crucial moment in history.
Yeah, exactly.
In other words, this was archival footage that was already set up to be played. The whole thing was scripted. Let me give you another example. They've been comparing this truck attack with what happened in Nice, France, okay? In Nice, they had an 18-wheeler in a part of the city where big trucks were not allowed. It allegedly mowed down 84 people. When you looked at the front of the truck, there was not a speck of blood. If you look at a photograph of a car that hit a single deer, it's smattered with blood. We took a close look at the bodies. They were mannequins. They actually used mannequins. I was so stunned when Ole Dommegard, with whom I've done many interviews.
I love his work. I love Ole's work. I've been listening to him since Red Ice from way back.
Ole's great. Yeah, I was doing a book on From Orlando to Dallas and Beyond, and Ole did an essay in which he included Nice, and we had photographs of the mannequins, which I thought was so appalling, I put it right on the back cover. That's another book you can find at Moonrock Books. But just as a way of tying things together, because I know we're out of time, Ole's going to be doing a webinar, a video seminar 2.0 on Sunday, Las Vegas 2.0 with Ole Dommegard, a massive psyop in great detail. Now, what's important about this from my point of view is Ole and I have been doing independent investigation of Las Vegas. We haven't been comparing notes. So you get a completely separate take, meaning Ole will have done his own investigation, and I'm going to bet that he's going to come up with the very same conclusions as I.
Now, this is
Namely,
going to be...
It was a movie. It was a made-for-TV production.
This is going to be live on Sunday?
Live on Sunday for 2 hours.
And where can we watch this?
Go to his website, Light, L-I-G-H-T, on conspiracies.com. Because he's shedding light on conspiracies. And you'll see.
If you could put a word into Ole for us to actually get him on our show too, that would be awesome. I'd love to interview Ole as well.
Sure, just send me a note telling me what you'd like to pitch to Ole, and I'll be glad to do it. Yeah, we're
excellent.
Regular correspondence.
Outstanding.
But I think this is a terrific opportunity for those who are skeptics about Las Vegas. I mean, the amount of evidence I've adduced is overwhelming, but here's an opportunity for an independent verification. Check out Ole and his work, done completely separate of mine. When you find two students such as Ole and I have done all this research on false flags, if we converge about this one, that's rather powerful confirmation that we're both right.
That really is. I've been following him since his first work about the Swedish Prime Minister's assassination.
Right, hold on, Paul.
Yep, and excuse me, and I've been following yours since the first time I heard you on Red Ice, and
I've done quite a lot before that, but I like Heinrich. Was a wonderful interview, and he got his whole website was trashed. He has had to
they're still work. Yeah, I talked to him the other day. They're still working on getting that back together. He's been really busy. He's been really busy.
He's a super good guy, really highly intelligent, very disciplined, excellent judgment. I'm very impressed with Heinrich.
Oh, yeah. Him and Lana, they're both awesome people. I finally got I met him a few years ago back in Palo Alto, California at the UFO convention out there, and then I saw him for about 5 minutes in Charlottesville while he was getting his website attacked. It was like right in the middle of all that. I got I literally got like 30 seconds, but yeah, Jim.
I want to thank you guys for featuring me tonight. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. And
man, it's been great. I'd love to have you on again, Scott. I know you haven't said a whole lot tonight. You guys got any questions for Jim before we take off?
Well, I've just been enjoying this. I don't really have a whole lot to add. I do have one question for Mr. Fetzer. I mean, obviously, you've written. I don't know how many books you've written. Quite a number.
Well, I published 35.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
But some of them, many of them were edited. Like all these. See, this is collaborative research. It's so important to bring different experts together. When I'm dealing with an issue where I myself am not expert, I bring in persons who are. So that's one of the strengths of my research. It's collaborative. So any of my books on any of these conspiracies is not just me. It's a dozen or 15 or more contributors or experts in different fields. So you're not just getting my opinion. I'm distilling the research efforts of a collaborative group.
It seems to me that there's a lot of times conspiracy people, I mean, some of them go out and be like, there's no moon dummy or whatever. But is there anything that you believe the quote unquote official story on? Any sort of
well, sure, most of history. I mean, look, we're talking about a dozen or 16 events out of millions of events in history, the vast majority of which are perfectly authentic and accurately reported. You want to look for things that have political significance with the timing. The timing can be crucial, and where the features of the event just don't add up. And you'll find that again and again when you have this contraindicating evidence about Sandy Hook or the Boston bombing or Las Vegas. It's when you get into the details, or 9/11 or JFK. I mean, once you realize that Lee Oswald's backyard photograph was fabricated, we've been able to prove that was a fellow by the name of Roscoe White, who was a Dallas police officer who stood in for Lee Oswald in the backyard photographs, and we've been able to prove it now rather conclusively. I mean, once you detect a false aspect of any aspect of these cases, there's a principle under the law that fraud vitiates everything, essentially. In other words, if there's a significant part of a case that turns out to be fraudulent, you're entitled to dismiss the entire case, and we've shown that to be, I give you dozens and dozens of sufficient reasons to recognize that these events are fraudulent, and I bring in a dozen or more experts, each of whom is making their case about aspects of I don't think there's a lot of room for wiggle when the research groups that I put together are done.
Okay. I gotta say, I had a lot of fun, if not contributing, listening to this. I'm sure everyone else is
fantastic.
Adam, you got
Well, I'm real
anything on
glad
it?
you guys had me on, and it's. I had my first show on Revolution Radio today from 3 to 5.
Oh, cool.
And we had a minor technical glitch at the beginning, and I was bringing in James Perloff to be my featured guest, which I have been doing rather regularly. So we lost the first 20, 25 minutes because when I brought him in, I didn't get back connected to the studio. So, I'll obviously be on top of that next time around, but I just feel good about being back in the saddle because after being taken out from discussing these issues on the 19th, for me, it's been a matter of, pursuing all the research I can, helping to finish off the Charlottesville book and so forth. I'm going to be doing a book on Las Vegas. I mean, it's going to be a killer. And, there's just a whole lot. I'm working on a lot of fronts because I believe it's indispensable to document these events, so that, future historians can go back and see what really happened as opposed to what was published in the newspapers.
Exactly. Well, I think that just about covers all of it. Again, Jim, thanks for coming on. We will be
thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely be in touch to have you on again one of these days.
You gotta send me a note about Oli, and I'll approach him about coming on your show.
I'll do that right away. All right, thank you very much, sir.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you, guys. All three of you. I enjoyed it a lot.
Excellent. Thanks
man. Very, very much.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Bye now.
All right, guys. That was the one and only Mr. Jim Fetzer. How do you guys feel about that?
That was fantastic.
There were no brakes on the Fetzer train. Holy cow.
Yeah. All right. You guys literally I went in the other room and and the wife was like, aren't you doing a show? I'm like, yeah. I was like, I haven't had a chance to say anything because Jim, there's no brakes on the Fetzer train.
I'm.
Are you guys as woke as me right now? Are y'all as woke as me?
I actually didn't think he would be as woke as he is on the JQ. I was actually really impressed by that.
He really is. I knew I was saving that as a treat for you guys because I knew how woke he was. And I wanted to save that. He really is. Yeah, this was great.
Also, the guy is basically an encyclopedia for names. Like he's just dropping like.
Yeah, he's like Musonius Rufus. Like, yeah, he's got that Musonius brain going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's a good show, man. We got a good.
That was actually.
We got a good solid 2 hours. We don't have no filler, no nothing. This was a good thing. This was a really good show. This is going to be a hard one to top. I mean, we're going to need to get some. We're going to need to get some guests. I have a feeling I have a feeling that the Ahnenerbe Hour is becoming less of a lighthearted and more into a serious type. Maybe this turns into the show that Alex Jones should have been doing the whole time. Like real conspiracies from the right point of view, from the white point of view.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I am. The JQ thing has really put me over the point where I'm like, I've taken a lot more seriously now. Because it seems like the crackpots, that's like the one thing they won't touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like
David Icke,
he might have
that kind of thing.
He might have glued those cracks back together. You know what I mean?
We should have asked him about David Icke.
Next time we will.
I want to get his opinion. I want to see what he thinks about.
Dude, there were so many questions I wanted to ask him, but I just couldn't. I mean, I tried to interrupt him like 40 times, but the dude's got no breaks, dude. I mean, like I would love to see him and Mike Enoch on the same conversation. Like, who would run who over?
Holy shit!
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, all right, guys. Well, we've got a good solid. We got a good solid 2 hours out of this. And I kind of lied about I kind of lied about the emails. You want me to read an email real quick while I'm here, or what?
Oh yeah, let's just do that.
All right, let me pull that back up because I closed it out because I didn't think we were going to do it. But yeah, Jim Fetzer, dude, and like none of what I said about him, like me being a big fan of his or having read his books or having listened to him for years, none of that's bullshit. I have been reading and looking at his stuff for years, and I am a big fan of Jim Fetzer's. And we did do the whole thing where we had Jim Fetzer on the show, and that was fun and all, but yeah,
but the impression pales in comparison to the real. Like, I'm sorry, Adam, your impression, while good, doesn't hold a candle to the
actual
the real Jim Fetzer. Yeah,
I was super impressed by.
Doesn't hold a candle to the real deal.
To the real deal. Oh, we got it in there at the end. What do you guys think of that story about his dude getting his fucking cable cut twice?
That's pretty crazy.
I don't disbelieve it though.
Oh yeah, no, I believe it. It's just fucking crazy, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we are. I'm trying to open the email and it's not opening. All right. Well, we're not going to do the emails then. Okay, we'll do the emails next week. We got a good show coming up next week. We got another return guest. You guys, you know what I'm talking about, Scott. We got that in the group.
Yes, I do. I know.
Return guest. Yeah. He's been on once already this season. He's going to come back on again. Anyways, so let's get out of here. We're going to take this out. We're going to let Brad read us off with a creepypasta. This is The Statue, and this has been the Paranormies Present, the Ahnenerbe Hour. For Scott Taylor, Adam Haidt, I am Johnny Monoxide, and we will talk to you later.
No brakes on the Fetzer train.
A few years ago, a mother and father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the two children were already fast asleep in bed. So the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the babysitter got bored and went to watch TV. But she couldn't watch it downstairs because they did not have cable. The parents didn't want children watching too much garbage. So she called them and asked if it was okay if she could watch the cable in the parents' bedroom. Of course, the parents said it was okay. But the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the angel statue outside the bedroom window with a blanket or cloth, because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father, who was talking to the babysitter at the time, said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We'll call the police. We don't own an angel statue." The police found both of the children and the babysitter slumped in pools of their own blood. Within 3 minutes of the call, no statue was ever found.